Welcome back to She Can, where women role models lead by example by telling their stories, their insights and experiences to support and guide others, because it's easier to be what you can see. And I'm absolutely honored and delighted to be talking to Dr. Anino Emuwa today. Anino, welcome to She Can. You couldn't be more perfect for She Can if you tried. You're the CEO of Avandis Consulting, a boutique firm providing research-led strategy and leadership advisory services to businesses, leaders, and entrepreneurs worldwide. You're also the founder of 100 Women at Davos, a dynamic community of extraordinary leaders dedicated to creating positive change, a real beacon for inclusive leadership. You love to explore how to drive positive change together with an organization and to support and boost careers of female leaders. You have more than 25 years experience in banking, management, consulting, and research. You're a keynote speaker, a leader in inclusion, impact, and AI, a top voice on LinkedIn. You're on the global advisory board of UK's 21st. You're on the board of several other organizations, among them the Nottingham Trent University, and you're the recipient of so many awards, there are too many to name. You are a mentor at Cambridge for the Enterprise Women Program, and your company that you're CEO of, you really are leading in a very inclusive, diverse, and equitable way. Anino, tell us a bit more about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Well, Stephanie, thank you very much for that kind introduction and for having me on your podcast today. Thoroughly delighted. Okay, so a little bit about my journey, which started off studying economics because I wanted to go into investment or corporate banking. I really was interested in how finance was this sort of non-visible resource, but was really driving businesses. And so I did start on my career after a degree in economics, specializing in monetary economics, with Citibank back home in my country of origin in Nigeria after studies in the UK. And as a corporate banker, very young, this was in my early 20s, I had the task of writing credit requests for these big multinational companies. And so, as you would imagine, these were sort of credit approvals of millions of dollars to finance big business. But somewhere along the line, much as I enjoyed my job, I think, the economics and the economic development part of it sort of struck me in the sense that I thought these are big businesses, but what's happening to small businesses? Because they are the ones who are going to drive development and economic development. And I'd had the opportunity after several years to live in several African countries, and I still notice that that's the gap in terms of for smaller businesses and entrepreneurial businesses in getting finance. And I was at that stage also working as an independent consultant, helping intermediating for smaller businesses and with banks and banking institutions, how they can raise finance. And I thought that, look, this needs to be done at a much bigger scale if change is going to happen. And that's what then moved me into my research studies many years later, which was how to overcome barriers to finance for smaller businesses, because I felt that this was, a key issue. But in addition to that, even though my research wasn't necessarily focused, in fact, it wasn't at all focused on female entrepreneurs, it was just entrepreneurs in general. But I was working with female entrepreneurs, and I used to run a program, a seminar for them, which was a bit like an MBA for smaller businesses. And so I noticed that it wasn't just the issues of finance, but it also had to do with other other requirements. So, for example, everything, whether it's marketing, it's leadership, etc. And so I started working in a more holistic way with female entrepreneurs, and that also led me the whole field of leadership and women's leadership. And after several more years, then into women in the corporate field. And so I found that, really those two were linked, both women as entrepreneurs and women in leadership. And really that's what drove my work today and again, from an economic perspective, is that how do we ensure that we have the best leadership talent that the world deserves in the private sector? And when we see that there's an imbalance in terms of percentages of women as leaders, then we know that there's a lot of talent that is still being left behind. And in today's world, being so very complex, I think we need to get all the talent we have on board. And so that is really about inclusive leadership today, getting all the talent on board. And that means certainly not overlooking the 50% of talent which are in women.
Anino, I want to honor you for a moment and say that I'm so unbelievably inspired by all the work that you've been doing. And you really are leading by example in all the different roles and spaces that you inhabit. I'm wondering, what do you think are your main learnings in championing diversity and inclusion across all the industries that you're involved with?
Well, I think there are two things. One is that when we look at it, and sometimes there's a bit of a debate, but I don't think it is a debate. It's quite clear to me. When you have an issue that really concerns 4 billion people in the world, 4
Mm.
billion women and girls, but actually, somebody's corrected me to say it's actually everybody because the impact on everybody, 8 billion. It is a massive issue, and there's no one size fits all. It is a complex issue. And with my role as a researcher, what I do see this clearly, if we can simplify it, is there two issues, right? And this is really simple. One relates to women, the other relates to the environment. So that is to say that if historically women haven't really been pushed forward into leadership, that means women are left out of the kinds of informal and important, right, kinds of networks and things, right? So we have that about networks, about what are the opportunities, how do you move forward, etc. So we have that. So that's certainly an issue, and that we do work on that. But I think more importantly is actually changing the system. And changing the system is a combination of one, laws and policies, whether the laws in terms of governments or in policies in terms of organizations. There's that. But there's also changing behavior within organizations because organizations are based on industrial revolution of 200 years ago. And that's how we have the systems that we have in the world today. So we're trying to make those systems, right, fit into the reality of what our society looks like, which is quite difficult because once you have institutions that have them, really as part of the system, it's difficult to change and dismantle. So what we're trying to do is one, to change legal laws and policies, change behavior within organizations, but also equip women in terms of the knowledge and skills and all of that, all of the things they need to do in order to progress.
Nino, you lead a company as a CEO. Tell us a little bit more the ways that you feel you can lead a diverse and inclusive company in this day and age.
First thing I think is that, first of all, I totally believe that it comes from the top. So you lead by example. That's the first thing.
Mm.
Change can come in at any level. We've seen great movements across the world, across the globe over, hundreds of years. Change can come in at any level. Change comes in, at lower down or grassroots, that's called a movement, right? But really, the change should come from the top. So the leadership is the one that sets the tone. And we've seen that. I see that in the work I do with organizations. So that is the way that change comes easier, quicker, faster when it comes from the top, because we're not resisting, right? So that is the thing. So it's absolutely from leadership. Number two, what we're finding that in our work with working with organizations, creating diverse and inclusive teams at board level and within the organization, is that one, it should come from a strategic level. So it should be part and parcel. It shouldn't be looked at as something that comes naturally because systems, even when women are leading, the systems that we have been geared towards a certain type of leadership. So we actually need to make sure that you're working on that the board, from the board level, right down through management, it is part and parcel of what it is you're doing. So it has to be intentional. It
Mm.
is also absolutely a mindset. You need to actually believe in it as well.
Anino, so as the founder of 100 Women at Davos, where you've been, mentoring and collaborating and connecting and communing with so many other amazing women leaders, What main insights do you feel you got and the takeaways you have from doing that you can share with us?
First one is, there's this, you hear this term, if you, women need a seat at the table, right? And if you
Yeah.
don't have a seat at the table, what do you do? And that's literally what I did, was actually build that table, not for myself, but for other women. Building a platform that will allow women to have more inclusion in terms of decision making. And we started that from Davos. So that was really allowing women to be part and parcel of the discussions that were happening in Davos, which we do today. So we're known, and organizations will reach out to us if they want a woman leader as a speaker, they want women at certain levels to be part of their events, they will reach out to us. So we actually do that, quite actively. So that is the key one, is really just stepping out and doing it. If you see that it doesn't happen, don't wait for it to happen. Literally do it for yourself. So that's the first thing. But another thing, and I think it's been accelerated by what is happening in the world today, is that women, first of all, collaboration is key. There's no one person or organization, and certainly not a small one like ours, that intends to actually move the needle all by oneself. Absolutely not. What we do is we work in collaboration with many other organizations that are doing things in different ways, and that is where we're going to get, real change happen. But I think it's truly, it's really important that when we look at what's happening in the world today, we actually see what women do have, maybe not in sufficient power in terms of percentages, but women in what they're doing are really very powerful. And what they're saying is that we want this change happening. So what we're actually seeing is many years ago, what you'll have when many women who are in senior level positions are there in terms of trying to achieve what they're achieving for themselves in their jobs, right? And the women who are working were trying to bring change. And there was almost, it was almost like uh, two different things, right? Really. But what you're finding is that literally almost any woman you talk to who is in high level leadership wants change. And that is the changing dynamic that we're actually seeing. Seeing women are stepping into their power, irrespective of what it is they're doing, and saying that this change needs to happen because we see the issues that are there in the world, and we know how more women in leadership and a more balanced leadership can actually go a long way into making change.
Anino, given the times we live in, where we have a backlash against diversity and inclusion, we have women still not supporting other women, where we have, women entrepreneurs still having great difficulty accessing capital, with only 2% of VC capital going to women, and that declines even further when we're talking about a Black woman. That's, I think it's 0.3%. What tips would you give to women leaders or women entrepreneurs from your experience?
Well, you are totally right about the backlash. And the backlash, the way I look at the backlash is that real change, when change happens and systemic change happens, it's not linear. You
No.
always have this. Every movement in the world has always shown that. So it is, in some sense, in inverted commas, it is normal. It's not abnormal. It's not unexpected, right? So that's the first thing, is people do not give up power. People who don't deserve power do not give up power easily. So that, to some extent, explains the backlash. So, but the directionally, we are moving forward, right? And there is a movement for people for this thing to happen, to move forward. So that's the first thing. Now, when we look at the issue of finance, which truly concerns me because that is my background and that is what my research was into in terms of financing entrepreneurial activity, it is a big problem. When you have less than, I think last year was even less than 2%, which is awful. But I think we have to look at it in two ways. One, the first thing is look at venture capital is specifically to a certain type of business. It is specific to a fast growth scale of business. We want women to be in that space. There's no doubt about it, right? But when we looking at the whole spectrum of finance, let us also look and see what are the other alternatives of finance that are actually there. But it is one of those, it's a major glass ceiling. It's a major glass ceiling that still needs to be broken. And that is where I think we should put a lot more effort in. And I'll just finish up on that note and say one area, and I think that where a lot of change can happen, where I don't see a lot of focus on changing that, is when we look at venture capitalists, very often we look at it and look at it from the perspective of the venture capital firm or the venture capitalists, they may have their own funds, but most of the funds, a huge part of the funds are actually public sector funds.
Mm.
So those funds come from your pensions, they come from government, they come from insurance companies, right? And I think that we should be looking at the people who make the decisions, right? So who are those investment managers in those pension funds in government who are putting in funds in places where they're not investing in women, right? So we shouldn't just look at it simply as the venture capitalists themselves. It's the people who actually have the funding. The other movement that we see is with the 30 trillion worth of financial assets that will come into hands of women, which is called the Great Wealth Transfer. Women will be in control. That is going to change the game. So women should get ready in using their power of influence to make sure that funds go where they should go, which is equally into the hands of both women and men. So that is another movement that is coming, which I think will change the game in the next 5 years to come. As I think we'll see a big shift, or at least we have the potential to see a big shift soon.
Yeah, and I always think that's actually by 2030, which is very exciting. Those data
Exactly.
points are very encouraging.
Yeah.
Anino, you've been talking about the sort of entrepreneurs and smaller companies that you got really interested in. Can you share some of your experience and insights working with them and why that is so important and that they are really the ones who uphold our economies and fuel our economies?
Oh, absolutely. If first of all, if we look at it, smaller businesses tend to account in most economies, in most market economies, for most jobs, right? In the first
Yeah.
thing, so for employment is key. If we look at the contribution to GDP, it's almost even, right? Maybe 40-50%.
Yeah.
It's almost even, right? So they contribute to the economy in terms of turnover. They contribute in terms of employment much more than bigger firms. So they're critically important. And so if we do put in more funds right into smaller businesses and women-led businesses, these are opportunities for growth. So that is what is key and it's important. And I think that if we use the example actually of both the US, probably in the 50s, 60s, and certainly in the UK in the 80s, under Margaret Thatcher, when she realized that you really needed to move into a more market-based economy, you find that that's what actually spurred the growth then.
Mm.
So it is entrepreneurship at all levels, not just the big tech and innovation, which is key and important, but in all ways is critically important. And female entrepreneurship has the potential to contribute significantly to growth. So these are some of the reasons why it's truly important that we should put funds, and not just funds, also other resources into entrepreneurship.
Anino, could you talk to us a little bit about how you see AI and the impact and what impact it could have on our workplaces, our lives, our push for inclusion, diversity, and equity?
Yes, with AI is totally transforming, forming our lives, our work and jobs. So, possibly in about another 5 years, maybe 30% or more of the jobs that exist today won't exist. So there's this massive transformation that is happening, and we shouldn't be looking at it fearfully, but looking at it as an opportunity.
Mm.
Firstly, in the sense of AI for good, I will be moderating a panel at Cannes Lions in the next few weeks. I will be at the AI for Good Summit in Geneva in another few weeks, Tech Diplomacy Forum in another few weeks, and this is some work I've spoken at the UN on AI and inclusion. So the issues of ethics, the issues of a bias are certainly key ones, certainly for me and for the work that we do at 100 Women at Davos and Avandis Consulting, without a doubt. Because at the same time that you have innovation, we must make sure that innovation is actually inclusive And we must try to limit the damage. Otherwise, in another few years, we'll be back to where we are, or maybe even worse, trying to deal with the side effects. So that is one thing. But then look at it in terms of the opportunity as well. And the opportunity means that we need to close the tech gap and the gender gap in AI. And what does that mean? First of all, I did set up a group on women leaders in AI. We had a few. I think it was in yes, end of March. We had our list of top 100 women in AI, and that was very well received. So just drawing attention the women in AI as well and role models, we think is really important to normalize that, and so that other women can look at that and say, oh, can I also be a leader in AI? So that's the kind of work that we do. But really, looking at it as the opportunity, we need to close the tech gap. We need to have more financing and funding for AI innovation for women. We need to have more in terms of education. We've done some kind of work on AI education for women leaders with one organization that we collaborate with, because we collaborate on many fronts as well. So one is, it's an opportunity. It's going to change our lives. It's going to create new jobs. But we need to make sure that women and girls, right, have access, and also access training, and make sure that AI is more inclusive. There's a lot of work to be done, and I'm pretty pleased that Europe is taking a leading role in that. The AI Action Summit, we were part of that a few months ago as well, which is where the government's coming together around the world to make sure that regulation also looks at some of these issues. But it's something that I think we need a lot more effort, a lot more action has to be in that, with the way AI is developing so quickly. We also need to make sure that governments are part of this.
Yeah, I always feel that, visiting various governments around Europe, they are very slow. They're slow to respond to this incredible revolution, AI revolution that we're seeing. And I think we need to have more initiatives privately and business-wise to make governments take more action. Anino, I'm wondering, what do you feel really matters to you now, and how do you want to matter? You have so many hats that you wear constantly. What do you feel are sort of the important things that really matter to you, and how you want to matter in the world?
Well, for me, I think if I can put it just in one term, it simply is inclusive leadership. But that is a broad term, and I mean inclusive leadership from the point of view of having more women in leadership, and that's simply it's not. I mean, the justice piece is as important as anything. But what drives me is when I look at the state of the world, and I think that with the complexities that we're facing, and with the multipolarities, with the issues with the peace issues and security issues. These are big, right? And with AI coming and disrupting, and we need to move faster, and we need to do better. We can't do it. No one can do it alone.
Yeah.
And we need more people. So I think that my work is really about making sure we have all the talent possible in order to make change happen.
What does success look like for you?
You see, that is really interesting because, in fact, I had that comment, and I think that when you are driven by impact, you're driven by something that is always bigger than you and is always bigger than what you can achieve, right?
Yeah.
Will we see inclusive leadership in my lifetime? Certainly not, right? Even if it was to happen, I would want it to happen. It won't be driven by me. I'm just a small cog in the whole wheel by many people. So that is the ideal, but would we get there? But I think for me, what success looks like, it's funny that I tend to think more like a macroeconomics on a global scale, on large scale change. But I must say, Stephanie, literally every day, I'll give you an example. I was at a conference at UNGA, right, the UN General Assembly, a side conference, and I was in a room. This was a room where you had leaders, presidents, all kinds of leaders in the room, and this lady just rushed up to me and she says, "Do you know me?" And I said to her, "Of course I know you. What do you mean, of course I know you. I know you very, very well. And and she said to me, you changed my life. This is a top CEO of a top. She said, you changed my life. And I thought, what are you talking about? She was a client, right? But I realized that we were only meeting for the first time because we had done all our sessions online. And she goes, I haven't told you this, but what you did for me, the place I was in at that time, and where she was now, heading a really impressive financial institution. She said, all that happened, well, that could only have happened because of my work with you. And so what I'm saying is that whilst large scale change is what's important to me, when I meet my clients and people whose lives, and it's not just for their lives, but what their work is now doing for others, for me, that is also what also drives me and tells me that the work is important and meaningful. So there are these two large things. There's large scale impact, but also there's depth of impact on individual people's lives.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for telling us this beautiful story. And Nino, I mean, I'm sure you have challenges like everybody. How do you reframe them? How do you look at a challenge and reframe it?
Reframe it. Every challenge has a solution. I think that is the way to reframe it, right? Because when you look at a challenge and you are focusing on the problem, it can get very depressing, right? So it's more of a solution. And solutions, and there's no one way to say a solution. It could be your solution, it could be someone else's solution, it could be changing the challenge, whatever it is. So I think is even just using the words, right, and saying what's the solution sometimes actually helps. So lots of challenges, but looking at them more in terms of what are the solutions that we can get to deal with these challenges.
Anino, and what are your plans and goals for 2025 and beyond that you can share with us?
Yes, our plans. First of all, the one thing that we did launch at in January alongside the World Economic Forum in Davos was our Inclusive Leadership Council made of 5 amazing women. So that is, that is the key thing that we're looking at, that we're driving, and that's in terms of bringing out our position papers and white papers, etc. So that is our immediate challenge, immediate plan for this year. The second thing is that, and that's no big secret at all, but I'm really honored to be a member of the UN Women's Leadership Network, which was launched at UNGA last year, formally launched at UNGA last year, and very soon we're going to, the outcome of that is going to be apparent to the world and what we've been working on. I'm delighted to be a member of the working committee, working very hard, having meetings every couple of weeks, and we're going to see what is going to come out from that. Is also about leadership, which is what I was talking about with my work. It's not about me doing anything on my own. It's working with other organizations together. So those are the two things that we want. We also want looking at expanding every year. We're expanding to new countries. And we have new things that we're doing, growing the community. So growth is equally important to us. I also launched separately with 2 other women, Women in Philanthropy and Impact Africa, which was, it was amazing. We launched that last year without knowing what was going to happen to where aid is, issues with aid. So we're working very hard on that in terms of how can we get more sort of catalytic philanthropy into the hands of women, actually, and women and women leaders and initiatives in Africa. So that is the other thing that is keeping us busy for this year.
Anino, what takeaways would you like to have our listeners by listening to your story?
Takeaways 2 for women who are listening is do not feel disheartened. A lot of change can happen by your own intentional actions, right? That's the first thing. The change is going to happen when each and every one of us actually take action. So don't feel disheartened. Actually take action. We are not in the 1950s, right? Women have more money, more power, more influence, more education than ever before. So we can make change happen. What I'd suggest is do please, link up with other women who are there in your field, in your city, whatever. We need that solidarity, which is really important. Now, for the men who are listening, and very often this is the thing with men, men who are listening very often may look at it in terms of it's something that women are doing, right? But realizing that this is not an issue for women, it's an issue for everybody. And what I think is missing is more action from men. Many men who really believe that change will happen, change needs to happen, but are not quite sure how to take action. Ask any woman, right, who is near you, who is, in business and work, whatever it is, they will tell you how you can be involved. So this change is something that we all need to be involved in. So for men, it's not something that you can look at and sit on the sidelines. It's something that you need to be actively involved in as well, because it's something that affects everybody and every one of us. Where we see more inclusive leadership, we see outcomes are better for society, men, women, girls, boys, everybody.
Dr. Anino Emuwa, thank you so much for your time, your incredible role modeling. You are a beacon of collaboration, connection on a global basis, all the incredible roles you hold, all the change you affect, and all the doing, which is so important, taking action, making your voices heard, collaborating with others that feel the same and have the same purpose, and for being so impact and purpose driven, and lastly for picking up and filling a hole where global aid is now falling short to bringing a group together that can bring about change here for Africa and for women in Africa that will need money desperately in the next decade. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you.